Good morning, First Baptist of Manchester Center. We welcome you to the May 29, 2022 service, and we're all glad you're here, our visitors also. And we want to say our announcements. Tomorrow is Memorial Day. On Tuesday, the prayer group and Bible study will be studying chapters 12 and 13 at 7 p.m. on Zoom, A Praying Life. On Thursday will be the interfaith meeting at 11:45 at the First Congregational Church in their vestry. We will also have choir practice at 7 o'clock on Thursday. The focus of our mission, which there's envelopes there, will be America for Christ offering. If you would like to contribute, please write AFC on the memo line of your check or use the AFC envelope. Next Sunday, on June 5th, our worship service is going to be at 9:30. So if you come at 10:30, you might miss. It's going to be cooler then, too. Also, we will be wearing red for Pentecost next Sunday, those who would like to. And at 7 o'clock at the Salmons home, they're going to have a campfire to celebrate Pentecost with some s'mores. So I'm sure, and sing some songs together. It's going to be a nice time together. And if you could please let Lindy Milet know if you could help out with the food cupboard. She has a sign-up sheet here, and I'll put it in the back. So it's on Wednesday afternoons for June, and Thursday morning and Thursday afternoon that we need some help to cover the food shelf for the month of June. Also, we're going to say a belated birthday to Teresa Taylor. Happy birthday on the 27th. And we would like to thank the Comars for bringing flowers in loving memory of Kathy's father, Ken Pierce. And we thank Linda Hewlett for the flowers in loving memory of her mom, Mary Smith. And now we will have a special video for Memorial Day.
You know, there's a story about a guy named Joshua.
From the Bible?
Yeah, that's the one. God told him to build a memorial out of stones.
Yeah, and the stones were to be a reminder of this great thing that God had done.
So we know it's not the same thing, but we were wondering if we could remember your dad with you. Remember all the great things he's done.
Sure.
So this one here, this one's for remembering a great friend.
This is for his part, keeping my kids safe at night.
You got one?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. This one's for him being the reason I even know anything at all about the Bible.
Yeah, me too, actually. This is for dragging us to church that first time.
This is for freedom to worship and his sacrifice for that.
This one's for not letting his best friends stay mad at each other.
You know, he loved the simple things. Things like people getting to speak their mind or having dreams and pursuing them. This is for defending those things.
You know, you don't have to do this if you don't want to.
I want to.
It's okay, buddy. Just take your time then.
This one's not just for my dad, but for all the people like him who helped protect their country.
I'll skip to that one.
Now we'll have the call to worship, and we're going to, from our blue hymnals, number 640, and you could join me in the bold sayings. We know that all things God works for the good for those who love God, who have been called according to God's purpose. What then shall we say about these things? If God is for us, who could be against us? God, who did not withhold God's own Son, but gave him up for all of us, will God not also give us all things with him? We shall separate us from the love of God, who worship it who possess, or persecute or famine, or nakedness, or danger of sword. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels nor rulers, nor things present nor things to come, nor any power, nor height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord.
Would you join me in the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Well, if you're new here this morning, you might not know this, but we're studying people in the Bible, kind of one life story each sermon. And there are people who aren't as well known or kind of in the shadows of the more well-known folks that we usually look at. And so this morning we're in the book of Genesis, and we're picking up, we had on Mother's Day looked at the story of Rebecca and how her life was marked by ambition in both positive and then eventually kind of negative ways. And this morning we're going to pick up and look at the story of her first child, Esau, who was followed very closely by her second, grasping his heel, the fraternal twin Jacob. The thing that I really noticed about Esau as I kind of studied his story as it weaves through several chapters of Genesis is he's a passionate person. He's capable of having and sometimes being dominated by strong emotions. Would you consider yourself a passionate person? We're given emotions by God, and they're part of what reflects God's image in us. And of course, some of those emotions are more pleasant to experience than others. I think most of us would like to be passionately joyful and grateful and loving, but there are also times when we experience those more negative emotions like anger and sadness and emptiness. And when those are felt very strongly, it can kind of really disturb us and people around us. Well, Esau experiences all of these kinds of emotions very passionately, and at times it seems to be the biggest motivation in his course of action that he does. His decisions seem kind of impulsive rather than well thought out. Maybe you can relate to that? I know I can. I have some pictures of bad haircuts to prove that. But we'll be following Esau through his stories in Genesis to see how his life unfolds in the wake of these decisions. But we're going to start out with the birth story, which is found in your bulletin. And Linnell's going to read it for us, Genesis 25.
Genesis 25, 19 to 34. This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he was married to Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel and sister of Laban. Isaac prayed for the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire to the Lord. The Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two people from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first came out, was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out with his hands grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. The boys grew up, and Isaac became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to staying at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Esau came in from the open country. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." That is why he was also called Eman. Jacob replied, "Sell me your birthright. First, look, look, I am about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright.
I kind of get the feeling that Esau surprised his parents by the way he looked when he was born. And that strikes a chord with me because, as my parents can attest, they were pretty surprised that I was born with red hair. Fortunately, it did not cover me all over like a carpet, was it? But we didn't know any other relatives that had red hair. So when I was a little girl and people said, well, where did you get your red hair? I just was like, well, my dog Sandy has red hair. It's an Irish setter. But the color red serves like a thread that kind of connects all of Esau's story. That's Edom means red too. And that would be the land he would eventually settle in, had like red dirt and red rock formations, kind of like out west where Natalie was in Utah. His hair was red, and the stew was red lentil stew. So there we go. I noticed the first passion I see in Esau is he is a hunter, and he likes to eat. He's a man of the open country, and he likes to be out in nature, hunting for game, rather than at home, taking care of the domesticated animals and flocks. And his dad, Isaac, really liked this about Esau. He was kind of a fan of those tasty dishes that he could prepare from the game. Are there any passionate hunters out there willing to raise their hand? All right. I have some in my extended family. My parents actually just came to our house from my Uncle Steve's cabin, which he has in a rural Pennsylvania area, and it's used primarily for hunting deer. He and my Uncle Bobby and their wives and their grown children gather in this cabin, but they have gone to the extent that they plant 14 fields of corn, sunflowers, clover, soybeans, alfalfa, and turnips, so that the deer in this neck of the woods are quite healthy and well-fed, and they like to hang around their woods. Sometimes hunters are so enthusiastic, it makes sense to them to devote this kind of time and energy and money and effort to the pursuit of the venison. Esau would be happy to be at that hunting cabin, but it seems like maybe he didn't have one of those. If he wanted a meal, he had to go all the way home to the base camp. And it seems that one day the passion for hunting kept him out in the open country too long, so that when he arrived, he was ravenously hungry and he couldn't think straight. I don't know if that's ever happened to you where you're just desperate for food. Sometimes they call that hangry. You're just like, give me the food. He smelled Jacob's lentil stew and he shouted, quick, let me have some of that stew. I'm famished. So Esau was smelling stew and he was completely fixated on his empty stomach. But Jacob smelled opportunity. Instead of just giving his brother some stew to eat, he first made him swear he would sell him his birthright. That's a pretty audacious move because the birthright gave Esau a double portion of the inheritance that their family would have, and it would make him like the head of the family at ceremonies and the leader. And Esau couldn't wait to gratify his appetite. So he lost focus on the consequences of his decision. And he says, the text says he despised his birthright, right? Because he figured if he didn't eat at that exact moment, he might die. And then what good would it be to him anyway? He didn't hold his birthright valuable enough to protect. Have you ever given away something or even a part of yourself that was really precious because you were fixated on something that you wanted right in the here and now? It happens all the time, especially in our society, because there isn't a lot of self-discipline and waiting built into our culture. We struggle with delaying gratification. We want to feel better instantly. And if our choice to indulge will hurt our health or our finances or our testimony, our reputation, our opportunities for the future, our integrity, our family. Sometimes we're not focused on that. We just want to feel better. We just want to be happy right now. There are lots of people out there that are kind of like Jacob, waiting to catch us at a weak moment when we feel empty, so that we'll give them whatever we have, and that's what they want. But one of the ways to avoid this trap is to find our fullness in God and to let God order our priorities, to be able to not push ourselves to the limit where we can't even think straight. And that way we'll be making better decisions because we aren't neglecting our health and we're not neglecting the things that are most important. Well, the next thing that it wasn't in our text, but I noticed as I kind of read through Genesis that Esau wasn't just a big hunter and really, really hungry. He also had a passion for women. Because the very next thing we read about Esau is that who has now acquired the nickname Edom, meaning red, for his hair and the stew. He gets married at age 40. And that doesn't sound so bad. It sounds like he kind of waited for, till he was ready. That was the age his dad Isaac got married. But this wedding was not such a good thing. He didn't consult his parents about who he would marry, which was very customary to do in this time. It was kind of more of a group decision or even an arranged marriage sometimes. But if he had consulted them, they might have said, wait, Esau, we want you to go back to Haran and get a bride from there, from our family tribe. But instead, Esau just looks around and marries a Canaanite lady. He chooses someone named Judith, who is a Hittite. And he also marries Basemath, another Hittite woman, at the same time. Now, I don't know if Esau is super enthusiastic about women that he wanted to start out life with 2 wives at the same time, or he just couldn't decide between 2 girls, so he married them both. I don't know. It just didn't go well. Genesis 26:35 says that the 2 wives were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah. If you remember Rebekah's story, she was like, I don't even want to live anymore. This is so horrible. But we don't know what the details are of how these women affected their lives and disrupted their household. But I did a little bit of research on Hittites in general. They were from Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, and they knew how to work with iron. They were fierce fighters, and they worshipped storm gods. So I'm thinking maybe Esau's 2 wives were in rivalry from the beginning, and they were kind of stormy. They have fierce warrior blood in them. So along with not consulting his parents before he got married, Esau didn't consult the Lord either. He didn't take the promise and the covenant with God that Abraham had made about a line coming from them, a nation coming from them. He didn't take any of that seriously. He was just living in the moment and doing whatever he felt like doing. Who we marry is a big deal. It's a decision that should be bathed in prayer because so much of the rest of our life is affected by that one choice. Some of you know the hurt of being married to a stormy person or maybe dating a stormy person. Others have gotten a second chance at life, either because now you're free and single, or because that person transformed, or maybe you found life with a true soulmate who isn't stormy and treats you with love. Esau actually did try again when he realized how disappointed his parents were with the first 2. In Genesis 28:9, we read that he goes to Ishmael. Remember we learned about Hagar and Ishmael, her son? So this is his dad's half-brother, and he marries her daughter, Nebaioth. So he's like, oh, it's a relative. So now he has 3 wives, and we don't get any more details about how that went. All we know is the genealogy, which takes up all of chapter 36, which tells me he's still really important in this story, isn't he? He has 5 sons, and there are some daughters, but they're not listed in the genealogy. So the next passion I noticed in Esau was a passion for his dad's blessing. Isaac was old. His eyesight was beginning to fail. And I can relate to the eyesight part because I'm really glad for the invention of glasses, or I wouldn't be able to read any of this with you. But poor Isaac, it was before glasses. His vision was beyond blurry, and he was starting to have to rely on other senses like touch and smell to make up for his poor sight. And he thinks he's not going to live very much longer, and he wants to have this special ceremony to bless Esau. Part of the ceremony involves eating a meal, so he asks Esau to go out bow hunting to get some wild game for a tasty meal. Tasty is actually in the text. Esau and Isaac share this passion for eating, but Rebekah overhears and forms a plan with Jacob to fool his father into giving him the blessing. So she makes some savory food from goat, dresses Jacob in Esau's clothes, covers his arms with goat skins so that he won't be smooth, and waits to see if this deception is going to work. Well, Isaac isn't absolutely sure that the person standing in front of him is actually Esau, but with some reluctance and some tests like smelling and touching and things, he decides he'll eat this food and pronounce the blessing over him. And then Esau gets back from hunting. He makes this big meal for his dad and brings it to him. His dad's like laying down. He's like, "Come on, Dad, sit up. I want to give you some of this great food so I can receive the blessing." And Isaac says, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm your son, your firstborn, Esau." Maybe he wondered if his dad's just really starting to lose it. Like, why doesn't he recognize him at all? But Isaac starts trembling violently, and he tells Esau that he's already eaten and given the blessing to Jacob. So Esau, passionate Esau, bursts out with loud and bitter cry and says, "Bless me! Me too, Father!" Then his anger starts to bubble up when he finds out that Jacob has stolen the blessing. And he says, "Isn't it rightly named Jacob," which can mean deceiver, the one who grasps as well? He's taken advantage of me. He took my birthright, and now he has taken my blessing. Haven't you reserved any blessing for me? Isaac can't think of what he can say to bless Esau. He's already told Jacob that he would lord over his brother and have plenty of grain and wine. So Esau is just weeping out loud and pleading with Isaac to bless him too. So finally, this is what Isaac comes up with. He says, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke off of your neck." Not the greatest blessing, is it? The next verse, you can probably imagine, is about Esau holding a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing. He actually was heard to be saying, "Once my dad dies, I'm going to kill Jacob." But Rebekah hears this. She's got really good ears. And she and Isaac send Jacob away to spare his life back to Haran, saying he needs to go find a wife from there. Now, you might not have any death threats in your family. I hope that you don't. But it's possible that you have some grudges. There might even be some relationships that have had emotional cutoff because there's been something that happened where emotions ran high and things were said that caused a rift. It's painful for everyone. What can we do when there's an emotional and physical cutoff in a family? I think the very best thing we can do is to pray to the Lord for resolution and for the health of the family. Not just peace at any cost, but real health. Because God can restore broken relationships, and he can bring good out of hurtful situations. And he might use us if our heart is in line with him, and we are constantly and consistently loving the other person. And so when the moment of reconciliation comes, we'll be ready, and we might be a good instrument in God's hand to help that happen. Well, the fourth thing I notice in and Esau is a passion for forgiveness. Jacob is away for 20 years. He's living with his uncle Laban, who is quite a trickster himself. Jacob learns what it feels like to be deceived because he thinks he's marrying Rachel, but he wakes up the next morning with Leah. And so now Laban, because Jacob didn't come with a bunch of money, he had asked Jacob to work 7 years to marry Rachel, and he says, and now you have to work 7 years more if you really want Rachel. So 14 years of working for Laban without getting paid, and then 6 more years to build up the wealth necessary to have his family and be able to move to another place back to Canaan. But Jacob is really nervous to go back, as you might imagine. He is scared to see Esau again. He doesn't know if Esau wants to kill him. He doesn't know if Esau will kill his wives and his children. So Jacob makes this elaborate plan to give himself the best chance of a good outcome. Jacob, he's a schemer, he's a planner, he's going to go in prepared. He sends his servants ahead with a gift. There's 3 different kinds of animals, but they add up to 550 animals, this huge group of animals to give to Esau. And it's a gift, it's an appeasement, and it'll also slow Esau down if he has to take care of all these animals. He can't be fighting a battle and taking care of animals at the same time. So his servants come back and they say, Esau's coming to meet you, and he has 400 men with him. Jacob is sweating. He is really nervous. He divides his family into 2 groups so that if they attack one group, at least maybe the other group will get away. And he can't sleep. He goes down to the brook by himself. And this is the time when he ends up wrestling all night with a divine being. And he's desperate. He's up against the wall, but he's still wrestling. He won't let go of the divine being's leg. So the divine being touches him on the hip and brings it kind of out of socket. So he still won't let go. He's like, you've got to bless me. And he gives him a blessing that God will protect him, and also that he has a new name now. He's not Jacob the deceiver, Jacob the grasper. He's going to be Israel. And he's getting a chance at a new identity. So he's really tired the next day, as you can imagine. He's limping, but he has some sort of peace in his heart. And here he goes to meet Esau. Limping Jacob is not walking proud. He actually bows to the ground 7 times, which is the sign that you're in the presence of someone who is your superior. And he calls Esau my Lord. He is in essence giving the blessing that his father spoke over him back to Esau. And Esau is the same passionate guy we know, but he's not angry. He runs to Jacob. He embraces him and he kisses him. And when we were singing one of the songs we were practicing on Thursday about the prodigal son returning to the father, it reminded me of this scene, running to him, embracing him, kissing him, letting all the offense go. That's where Esau is right now. Jacob even says that Esau's face is like the face of God to him. It's beaming with love and forgiveness. It's bright. It's not angry and dark. Esau tells Jacob, you can just keep all those animals. I've got plenty of my own. I don't even need them. God's blessed me. And that roll of the birthright that he had sold for the bite of stew and bread, he'd been enjoying that all the 20 years in Jacob's absence. He'd been the leader of the family. He had his parents to himself. He's like, I'm full. I'm not empty. You don't have to fill me up. But Jacob insists so that Esau eventually accepts the gift to try to mend the relationship. And Esau is so happy to be reunited with Jacob. He wants him to come to his home, the red land called Seir, that's also called Edom. It's present-day Jordan, and you might have seen a picture of something famous that is in this territory. Have you ever seen Petra? It was carved into the rock. It's like a city with big columns, and it's really cool. I think it's in one of the Indiana Jones movies. But that's where Esau lived in Edom. And so Jacob's like, well, I have my wives and my kids, and we're slower than you. You go ahead at first, and I'll be along. He wasn't coming along. He was going somewhere else. He was going to Canaan, and that's where God wanted him to go. But he could have said so, right? He's still got some of that deceiver in him, Jacob. But at least he's learned some humility, and I'm so glad that Esau got rid of his grudge. And I was thinking about how much it takes of transformation to let go of a grudge, to let go of anger, to let go of even rage sometimes. And I heard something. Have you ever seen any of the I Am Second videos? They're on, it's a place where people share kind of short stories about themselves and their relationship with God. But the one I heard this week was Ben Peterson. And he's a soldier, but he shared about winning the war on rage. And I thought, maybe he has something to tell me. Ben grew up as an only child in a house that had a lot of anger and pain and abuse. He also dealt with serious bullying in high school. So when he turned 17, he was looking for someone who would love him, that he could love back. And he found that in the military. They gave him a special forces slot, and he was excited because he really wanted to be cool and strong. And it was great until he went to the medical review and failed the colorblind test. So then he's like, what are my options? And the only two options were to be an administration specialist or a chaplain's assistant. He was very disappointed. So he says to them, which one would give me a better chance of killing terrorists and getting shot at? They must have said the chaplain assistant, because when he was 21 years old, Ben deployed to Iraq as the chaplain's assistant. And he was there. It was the first week of his tour, and one of the helicopters went down, and 7 guys died. And the head chaplain came and woke him up and said, we have a fallen angel. And they were talking to the people in the group for the next 40 hours straight. And then they had a memorial service. And then the people just kind of put their pain inside of themselves and had to keep going. But Ben really held it in. It was kind of stirred up in another situation where he had to go into a hospital where little children had been in a school and the victim of a suicide bomber, and they were it just wrenched his heart to see what they were going through and what had happened. Instead of feeling like a hero, Ben felt helpless. And when he returned to the States, he would wake up with nightmares and tremors. He said it was a dark time in his life, and he turned back to the drinking that he had done in high school before he gave his life to Jesus. He even contemplated taking his own life, and he thought that it would make more sense to him than to go on like this. But he called his mentor at 3 a.m, choking through tears, and just said, why? Why did we lose our guys that day? And his mentor spoke to him about how the disciples felt after they watched Jesus die on the cross. And they were like, why? Why did we lose him? We thought he was going to be the king. But Jesus had actually won a great victory that day over sin and death. And he rose again and came to them to show them that the pain wasn't wasted. And the chaplain said to him, Ben, if you're willing to wait, God's going to bring you back to life again too. So Ben said the nightmares didn't stop. It was still hard, but he chose to be with other people who believed in Jesus and would support his journey. And he learned something. He learned that helplessness produces rage. So he let God come into those helpless memories when they would surface, and eventually they were transformed with the love of God, so he didn't have to be so angry anymore. That's what God did for him, and that's what God's continuing to do. Ben started a program called Engage Your Destiny to bring healing to veterans and military families. He says, "I was so hopeless and in the dark, but with God, I have found life beyond what I ever could have imagined, and I'm watching my dreams unfold before me." Now, the text doesn't give us details about Esau's journey like we have about Ben's, how he came out of anger and darkness. But the way he met his brother Jacob with compassion and forgiveness, reflecting the very heart of God in his face, shows me that he had a transformed heart. You know, that day when he was crying and begging for his dad's blessing, he could never have imagined the life that he would have. Both Esau and Jacob came to enjoy their own inheritance from God, and Esau's descendants were actually able to stay in the land, while Jacob's went all the way to Egypt for 400 years. And when they came back through, those Israelites, on their way to the promised land, this is the instruction that the Lord gives them in Deuteronomy. He says, "You're about to pass through the territory of your relatives, the descendants of Esau who live in Seir. They will be afraid of you, but be very careful. Do not provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land, not even enough to put your foot on. I gave Esau the hill country of Seir as his own. You are to pay them in silver for the food you eat and the water you drink." It kind of makes me think that God was really paying attention to what Jacob did with that bread and stew and says, don't take hospitality for granted. God makes things right. And we've seen Esau's passions refined as he grew older and wiser. He was able to reflect God's forgiving character and grace to his brother Jacob when he needed it the very most. Esau was always a man of great feeling, but at the end his feelings are kind of in a balance with the perspective of seeing how God loves him and is blessing him despite the hard things that happened to him in his life. Some of those things came as consequences of his own choices. Others were just plain unfair. But God worked all those things together in his life for good and developed a relationship with him. What we see at the end of the story is a person who knows how to passionately love. And I hope that that will also be true of us. Would you pray with me? Dear Lord, thank you that you are just intimately involved in each of our lives, that you notice everything that comes to us, every hurt, every blessing. Lord, that you love us and you want us to thrive. If we have any grudges in our hearts, Lord, may we be willing to lay them down in humility and ask for a fresh start. If we're being stormy, Lord, calm us down. If we're being impetuous, help us to wait. Help us to check in with you. And most of all, Lord, just teach us to love. It's the best way that you have shown us how to live, and it's the biggest blessing of life. So thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.
There is love. There is love. When our hope is hard to find and our faith is in decline, we need a cause to stand behind. Love. We all want the way it feels. Time it comes and time it steals what remains and what is real. Love. There is love, there is forgiveness, there is love in time of need. When life is cold, there is a promise. you'll never go without. There is love, there is love. It heals the sick, comforts the weak, breaks the proud, raises the meek. In this life, no guarantees, but there is love. Yes, there is love, there is forgiveness, there is love in times of need. When life is cold, there is a promise you will never go without. Oh, love is the answer. Love will find a way when we love one another. It's a brighter day. Love is the answer. Love will find a way when we love one another. It's a brighter day. When life is cold, there is a promise you will never go without. There is love, there is forgiveness, there is love in times of need. When life is cold, there is a promise you will never go without. Love, there is love. Love, hello love.
Please receive your benediction from 2 Corinthians 13:11. Finally, brothers and sisters, rejoice. Strive for full restoration. Encourage one another. Be of one mind. Live in peace. And the God of love and peace will be with you. Amen.